Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And here we have a great article from Mike over at Light Reading. I'll leave a link to it in the description. So for those of you who haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out. So I made a video yesterday covering this, but I wanted to break this down even more in today's video. So, because this is going to be a lengthy process. This is not going to be anything short term. This is going to be over a long-term period where this is going to happen. So the rumor is AT&T may dump Nokia. So for those of you who have seen the video a few weeks back, especially the members, I'm about 99% sure that this is going to happen. So what does this even mean, right? What's going to happen here? So essentially what AT&T is going to do is they're going to get rid of Nokia on the vendor side, and they're going to make Ericsson 100% the vendor across the United States. So that means any market or state where Nokia exists is going to have to get ripped and replaced to Ericsson. That means all sites, not just the bigger cities. I'm talking about traveling I-10 from or I-15 or whatever from Vegas to LA. All those sites in between, they all have to be ripped. So that's a massive undertaking that could be happening. Because it's still a rumor. It's not officially announced, so we got to speak on it from a unofficial, speculative point of view. So, but it's going to be a massive undertaking. It's going to take a long time. I'm hearing markets could take 3 years to fully be ripped and replaced. That's one market. So that's just at this stage of where you're at. I don't know if you're necessarily wanting to do this, right? You're already behind on the mid-band deployment, and now you got to go and rip all these sites again and put up all this equipment. For the Nokia markets, it could be better, right? Because Ericsson does have better equipment. So I'll say that. But then, you're going to cause interruption. We're talking to rip and replace. So you're ripping equipment and adding new equipment. So that means the site is going to go down for, X amount of hours. And AT&T not having the greatest track record of density, I don't know how that's going to pan out. Verizon did this in the Nokia markets as well, but they had density. So other sites, small cells were able to fill in while that was going on. Now, it wasn't the greatest experience because the next site had to take on a lot more load, but it was still manageable. Right, I have some areas here, and I'm Ericsson, so I don't have to worry about it. But I have areas here that AT&T has 4 or 5 mile site spacing. That's going to be crazy to think with that type of rip and replace. And I know some markets on the East Coast, they're fine, right? They have great density or good enough density where that won't matter. But there's going to be some other markets, mid-sized, small, where there's going to be some serious issues. If you're within the top 50 PAs, you should be all right with AT&T. But if you're outside of that, if you're in a mid-sized market, AT&T generally doesn't do well. So it's a move that AT&T is making, and I think they're looking at it from a cost-saving perspective. They brought it up to the board. They said they like it. Investors are going to like it. It's a cost-saving measure. It's gonna save them a ton of money. They likely got a sweetheart deal. Ericsson likely said, if you make us 100% your supplier, we're going to rip and replace you for free. We're going to cover the cost, and then in the future, whatever else technology comes out, then of course AT&T has to pay the cost. But for now, to take on that size of business, they're probably going to cover it. So this is something many are going to be blindsided by. It's going to be very unexpected to see that even happening, right? Sprint, of course, that was Sprint, but they did a rip and replace, and you see what happened there, right? They went from a old 3G technology when data was already kicking up, and they tried to do a rip and replace to LTE. They called it network vision. It didn't really work out. They didn't have the density, so when the 3G towers were down and being upgraded, other sites that had some service, with LTE, they were just too far away and had too low a bandwidth. So it just made it for a really bad experience. Calls weren't going through, picture messages weren't sending. It was just the queue was too overloaded. And that could happen with AT&T very well. It's possible. Now data usage is way higher than it was 10 years ago. So even though they have more spectrum bandwidth on these sites, if the site spacing is too spread out, I just don't know if that's going to overload the queue. So if you're in the Nokia market, just be on the lookout for that. If this does get officially announced, just be on the lookout for that. AT&T is going to have to disclose a lot in the press release. They're going to have to disclose how long this is going to take. What are the effects? What are some of the pros and the cons? Of course, they don't really like to talk about the cons publicly, but they're going to have to make people aware if there's going to be issues. They got to let them know, especially if they want to do this with any, aggressiveness, like with any reasonable time frame. They want to do this, of course, as quickly as they can. So if there's like 3 or 4 sites at the same time, what's going to happen then? It's going to be different. It's going to be very different. And it's going to be something that we will have to, further break down in the future. The first one, of course, when the official announcement comes out, if it comes out, we got to break it down then with the official information. And then we got to see, right? We got to see, does AT&T maybe get priority on equipment? Because now Ericsson has to serve 100% of AT&T. They still got to serve half of Verizon, and they still got to serve T-Mobile, and they still got to serve the rest of the world wherever they exist. So that's a lot now on Ericsson's plate in terms of shortages and supply and demand, right? So a lot of people have been telling me, like, hey, I've already seen Ericsson shortages because they're already taking on a lot more carriers. So now going 100% AT&T, and then T-Mobile also swapping some states to Ericsson, could they be, running a bit behind? It's possible, but Ericsson will have to make that decision. If they got to hire more, if they got to build another factory to make these make this RAN equipment, they got to do it. They want the business. They got to figure it out. If not, there's always Samsung, right? If this doesn't work out for AT&T the way that they think, there's always Samsung ready to go. Verizon already showed us how that works. So, and for T-Mobile, they still carry a large amount of their network on Nokia. That might be better for T-Mobile. Nokia might be throwing equipment at them. In terms of the supply and demand, there shouldn't be any issues from T-Mobile whatsoever when it comes to supply and demand with Nokia, because Nokia has nobody now. The largest carriers, Verizon and AT&T, would no longer be on Nokia. So it's all now all with T-Mobile. So this is going to be very interesting. I'll keep you guys in the loop. We'll break this down further, what this means, especially if they go all RAN to Ericsson. That's going to be a whole nother shit show. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Like, share, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.